The air in the Borneo rainforest is thick with humidity and the smell of decay. It's a world that operates on ancient rules, where power is absolute and violence is a language understood by all. In the canopy, two giants face each other. One is a wild-born male, a behemoth of muscle and orange fur, the product of a million years of evolution. The other is an anomaly. His name is Kusasi. He is scarred, his face a testament to a dozen brutal battles. His eyes, dark and intelligent, hold a cold fury that doesn't belong here. Because Kusasi was not born of this world. He was raised by humans, in a concrete enclosure, a world away from this primordial struggle. He should be dead. Rehabilitated orangutans released into the wild are supposed to be outcasts, lacking the skills, the social knowledge, the sheer brutality to survive. They are ghosts in the jungle, destined to fade away. But Kusasi did not fade. He learned. He adapted. He conquered. The scene we are witnessing is not a fight for survival. It is the defense of a throne. The wild-born challenger bellows, a deep, resonant long call that shakes the very leaves. But Kusasi is silent. He watches, calculates. He remembers a different world, a world of metal bars and soft hands. And he uses those memories, that fractured identity, not as a weakness, but as a weapon. How did an orphan, raised in captivity, return to a jungle that should have rejected him, and wage a decade-long war to become its undisputed king? This is a story that defies the laws of nature, a story of an animal who broke the barrier between two worlds, and in doing so, wrote one of the most savage and extraordinary chapters in the history of primatology. This is Tanjung Puting National Park, in the heart of Indonesian Borneo. A sprawling, emerald labyrinth of swamp and forest, ancient and indifferent. Sunlight struggles to pierce the triple canopy, dappling a forest floor teeming with life and unseen dangers. Vipers lie in wait, clouded leopards hunt in the shadows, and the rivers conceal crocodiles. It is a world of uncompromising challenge, where every day is a test. It was here, in 1971, that a young primatologist named Dr. Biruté Galdikas established Camp Lakey. Her mission, part of the legendary trio of Lakey's Angels, alongside Jane Goodall and Dian Fossey, was to study the elusive orangutan and to save them. The camp became a sanctuary, a last hope for the victims of deforestation and the illegal pet trade. In 1978, a tiny, terrified infant arrived. He was found alone, his mother almost certainly killed by poachers. He was named Kusasi. For him, the world was not the rustle of leaves, but the clang of a cage door. His mother was not a 200-pound ape, but a human scientist in a lab coat. He learned to drink from a bottle, to play with toys, to trust the strange, hairless primates who cared for him. This was the paradox of Camp Lakey. To save these orphans, they had to be severed from their wildness. They were taught, nurtured, and loved, but every moment in human care was a moment they were not learning the complex art of being an orangutan. They didn't learn which fruits were poisonous, how to build a nest high in the trees, or how to navigate the intricate and violent social hierarchy of their own kind. The stakes for a released orangutan are impossibly high. Survival is a long shot. Acceptance by their wild counterparts is nearly unheard of. They are often bullied, starved, and killed. They are seen as strange, incompetent, and unwelcome. For Kusasi, the path back to the forest was meant to be one of quiet reintegration, of finding a marginal existence on the fringes of orangutan society. No one, not even Dr. Galdikas, could have predicted that this orphan from a cage was not destined for the fringe. He was destined for the throne. Upon his release into the semi-wild perimeter of Camp Lakey, Kusasi was an adolescent adrift. He was physically formidable, a product of good nutrition in captivity, but socially, he was a ghost. He didn't know the rules. He didn't understand the subtle cues, the body language, the complex vocalizations that governed this world. The jungle, which should have been his birthright, was an alien landscape. He was an outsider, and the wild-born males let him know it. They would charge him, display their dominance with terrifying shows of strength, shaking entire trees to chase him from the best feeding spots. Standard behavior for a rehabilitated orangutan is to retreat, to accept a lower status, to live in the shadows. But Kusasi did something different. He didn't run. He would stand his ground, absorbing the intimidation, and watch. His gaze was unnervingly analytical. Researchers watched, fascinated and concerned. He was learning not by instinct but by cold, hard observation. He was a student of power. He saw how the alpha male, a fearsome, flange-faced titan the researchers called Gundul, controlled everything. Gundul was the epitome of wild success, a massive, confident ruler who held dominion over the best territory and the most fertile females. He was a king in his prime, and his reign was absolute. Kusasi watched Gundul's every move. How he patrolled his borders, how he used his booming long call to announce his presence and intimidate rivals, how he asserted his dominance with a mere glance. Kusasi began to mimic these behaviors, but with a strange, unsettling twist. His long calls were at first clumsy, but they grew in confidence. He began his own patrols. When a subordinate male would charge him, instead of fleeing, Kusasi would hold his ground, sometimes using his familiarity with the man-made structures of the camp to his advantage. He would climb the research buildings, a place the wild-born apes were wary of, giving him a high ground from which to observe and project confidence. The tension was palpable. The other orangutans didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't behaving like a subordinate. He wasn't behaving like a wild male. He was something new, something unpredictable. The first real test came over a female. A receptive female entering estrus is a powerful magnet for male competition. Gundul, the king, moved to claim his right. But Kusasi was there. He didn't challenge Gundul directly, not yet. But he shadowed him. He made his presence known, a quiet, persistent threat on the periphery. It was an act of profound insubordination. Gundul responded with fury, charging Kusasi through the canopy. The chase was violent, a blur of orange fur and broken branches. But Kusasi didn't flee the territory. He simply retreated, waited, and returned. This was not a bid for survival. This was a probe, a test of the king's power. It was the first move in a chess game that would last for years. The jungle had a new player, and he wasn't playing by the established rules. For months, the situation simmered. A cold war raged in the canopy, fought with intimidating stares, threatening calls, and strategic positioning. Kusasi was building his strength, his confidence, and his reputation. He was no longer the awkward ex-captive. He was a presence, a shadow king waiting for his moment. That moment arrived at a massive durian tree. Durian, with its pungent smell and energy-rich flesh, is a prized resource, a treasure worth fighting for. When this particular tree came into fruit, it became the focal point of the entire orangutan community. Gundul, the reigning king, claimed it as his own. His long calls echoed through the forest, a clear declaration: "This tree belongs to me." Other males kept their distance, snatching fallen fruit from the forest floor, respecting the hierarchy. But Kusasi didn't respect it. He walked into the clearing, directly beneath the tree, and began to climb. It was a deliberate, calculated act of defiance, an open challenge to the throne. The jungle fell silent. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. From high above, Gundul watched this upstart's ascent. This was not a skirmish over a female on the periphery. This was a direct invasion of the king's court. The confrontation was inevitable. Gundul descended with terrifying speed, not chasing but intercepting. The two met on a large bough, 50 feet above the ground. There was no preamble, no further display. The psychological warfare was over. This was the breaking point. According to the field notes of Dr. Galdikas, the initial clash was a maelstrom of violence. But Kusasi fought differently. Wild orangutans often engage in wrestling matches, grappling and biting, with a clear winner emerging quickly. Kusasi was more direct, more brutal. He used his fists like hammers, a behavior rarely seen with such focus. He wasn't just trying to dominate, he was trying to injure. The fight raged for nearly 20 minutes, an eternity in ape combat. They crashed through branches, falling 20 feet at a time, only to resume their battle on a lower level. The forest echoed with their roars of fury and pain. The females and younger males watched from a safe distance, a silent audience to the bloody transfer of power. The fight ended not with a clear victory, but with a retreat. A bleeding and exhausted Gundul, shocked by the ferocity and unorthodox style of his challenger, broke away. He wasn't beaten into submission, but he had been fought to a standstill, something that had never happened before. Kusasi, also injured but unyielding, did not pursue. He simply climbed back up to the durian tree and began to eat. The message was unmistakable. The king was vulnerable. His authority had been shattered. From that day forward, Kusasi was no longer a contender. He was the other king. The jungle could not have two rulers. A war had been declared, and it would only end when one of them was broken or dead. What followed the battle at the durian tree was not a single, decisive event, but a protracted and brutal campaign of violence that lasted for years. This was Kusasi's war for the crown, and he fought it with a chilling intelligence and a ferocity that stunned the researchers who had once cradled him as an infant. His strategy was one of attrition. He relentlessly harassed Gundul, challenging him at every opportunity. He would appear at the edge of Gundul's territory, issuing his own long calls, a constant, nagging declaration of his intent. He would disrupt Gundul's attempts to mate, forcing confrontations and denying the king the peace required to maintain his coalition of females. The fights themselves were savage. Orangutan combat is a close-quarters affair, a contest of immense strength and powerful jaws. Males possess formidable canine teeth, capable of inflicting deep, tearing wounds. Fights often result in serious injuries. Fingers are bitten off, flesh is ripped from faces and limbs. Kusasi seemed to welcome this brutality. He accumulated a tapestry of scars that marked him as a veteran warrior. One notable encounter documented by the Camp Lakey team took place in a flooded swamp forest. Gundul, heavier and perhaps less agile, was at a disadvantage in the waterlogged terrain. Kusasi seemed to understand this. He initiated the fight in the canopy above the swamp, then drove the conflict downwards, forcing Gundul into the water. He used his environment as a weapon, a level of tactical thinking that was extraordinary. He would submerge and reappear, attacking from unexpected angles. It was a chaotic, desperate struggle in the black water, more akin to a brawl between two mythical beasts than a typical primate conflict. Kusasi was systematically dismantling not just Gundul's physical dominance, but his psychological hold on the territory. The king is supposed to be invincible. By repeatedly fighting him to a draw, or even forcing him to retreat, Kusasi was eroding that aura of invincibility in the eyes of the other orangutans, especially the females. The females, in their own calculus of survival and genetic fitness, began to take notice. Who was the better bet for the future? The aging king or the relentless, indomitable challenger? The final battle was not recorded in its entirety, as these conflicts often happen deep within the forest, away from human eyes. But the evidence was clear. Gundul was seen one last time, retreating from the core territory. He was defeated. He was bleeding from multiple wounds and, most importantly, he was silent. He issued no challenging long call. His spirit was broken. Days later, Kusasi patrolled the heart of the territory, his long call echoing, unanswered, through the trees. He was alone at the top. He had arrived as an orphan, an outcast who should have died. Now, through sheer force of will and strategic violence, he had done the impossible. He had deposed a wild-born king and seized the throne. The reign of King Kusasi had begun. Victory did not bring peace. For Kusasi, becoming king meant the war was never over, it simply changed form. His reign was one of absolute and often tyrannical control. He was not a benevolent leader. He was a despot forged in conflict, and he ruled through intimidation and the constant threat of violence. His days were consumed by the duties of a dominant male. He patrolled the vast boundaries of his territory, a relentless march through the canopy, reinforcing his claim. He would regularly unleash his deafening long call, not just a proclamation of his presence, but a warning to any potential challengers. This is my land, these are my females, stay away. Any male who dared to even approach a receptive female would be met with immediate and overwhelming aggression. Kusasi's rule was a case study in reproductive suppression. He monopolized the mating opportunities, ensuring that his genes, and his alone, would pass to the next generation. Researchers at Camp Lakey observed a significant increase in his consortships with females. He was a successful king by the only metric that matters in evolution, offspring. He fathered a multitude of children, embedding the legacy of the captive-born survivor deep into the wild gene pool. His relationship with humans became complex and fraught with tension. He was the king of the forest, but he remembered the camp. He understood the feeding platforms, a source of easy food. But he tolerated no familiarity. He viewed the researchers and the camp itself as part of his domain. He would sometimes charge the staff, not with lethal intent, but with the same arrogance he showed his orangutan rivals, a clear assertion that he was in charge here, not them. This dual identity made him uniquely fascinating and dangerous. He was a bridge between two worlds, comfortable in neither, yet master of both. The cost of his crown was eternal vigilance. He was never at rest. Every distant call could be a new challenger. Every young male growing stronger was a future threat. His body, already a roadmap of scars from his ascent, continued to collect injuries from the constant need to defend his status. Power in the jungle is a heavy burden. King Kusasi held that burden for over a decade, an incredibly long reign for an orangutan alpha. He had achieved the impossible, but in doing so, had sentenced himself to a life of isolation and endless conflict. He was the king, but he was alone. The story of Kusasi was more than just a dramatic jungle saga. It was a scientific revelation that forced primatologists to rethink fundamental assumptions about animal behavior. For decades, the prevailing wisdom was that rehabilitated apes, particularly those raised in captivity from infancy, were psychologically and socially crippled. They were not considered capable of fully integrating into the complex society of their wild counterparts. Kusasi didn't just challenge this idea, he shattered it. Dr. Biruté Galdikas and her team had a front-row seat to a unique natural experiment. What happens when you reintroduce an animal that has knowledge of two different worlds? Kusasi's success raised a profound question in the nature versus nurture debate. Was his incredible drive a result of innate character, a genetic predisposition to aggression and intelligence? Or was it his unnatural upbringing that gave him his edge? Some researchers theorize that his lack of a normal orangutan infancy, without a mother to teach him the proper social cues of submission, made him incapable of backing down. He didn't know how to lose. Others suggest his familiarity with humans and their environment gave him a unique form of confidence, a cognitive advantage over the truly wild apes. He understood the camp's routines, the researchers' behaviors, and was unafraid of things that might intimidate a wild orangutan. His strategic thinking, particularly his use of the environment in fights, was seen as evidence of a flexible, problem-solving intelligence honed by a life of unique challenges. His story provides a stark contrast to the social dynamics of other great apes. While chimpanzees, as studied by Jane Goodall, engage in complex political alliances and group warfare, orangutans are largely semi-solitary. Their politics are more personal, a series of violent one-on-one contests for supremacy. Kusasi's long, systematic campaign against Gundul was a perfect, if brutal, illustration of this. He proved that for orangutans, the path to power is a lonely and violent one. Ultimately, Kusasi became a symbol of both the success and the potential peril of rehabilitation. He proved that survival and even dominance was possible, a hopeful message. But his extreme aggression also served as a cautionary tale about creating an animal that doesn't fully belong to either the wild world or the human one. Even the greatest reigns must end. For more than 10 years, King Kusasi ruled the forest around Camp Lakey. But time is the one rival no creature can defeat. He grew older, his massive body racked by age and the countless injuries he had sustained. His movements became slower, his patrols less frequent. The young males he had once terrorized were now in their prime, full of strength and ambition. They could sense the king's power was waning. The challenges came, just as he had once challenged Gundul. Eventually, a younger, stronger male succeeded where all others had failed. Kusasi was deposed, but unlike his predecessor, he was not exiled. In a final, fascinating twist, he was allowed to remain in the area, a quiet, retired monarch living on the fringes of his former kingdom. He was last seen in 2006, an old, scarred warrior disappearing into the deep forest. He never returned. His legacy, however, is immortal. He lives on in the dozens of children he fathered, their DNA carrying the story of their impossible father. He lives on in the archives of science, a case study that redefined the boundaries of animal intelligence and adaptability. And he lives on as a legend in Borneo, the story of the orphan from a cage who became a king. Kusasi's life was a testament to the ferocious, indomitable will that drives all life on this planet. It's a brutal reminder that nature is not a gentle kingdom. It is a battlefield, and for one brief, spectacular moment in time, its most unlikely and unforgettable king was a creature from another world. His story forces us to look deeper into the eyes of these magnificent animals, and wonder what other incredible stories of intelligence, warfare, and conquest are unfolding, hidden from our view, in the wild heart of our world.